my art buddies, this is Maureen Celeste, and this will be a speed paint of an illustration that I did of Disney World's Haunted Mansion of the stretching room portraits. There are 4 of them. I've done one already, which was the tightrope walker over the crocodile, and this one will be the man on the keg of dynamite. This one, of course, is going to be rendered as a panda, so no surprise there for anybody who follows me on other social media. So while this speed paint is going, I'm going to share a little story with why I did not go to art school and one of my failed attempts at going to art school as an adult. As a child, my parents were very aware of my interest in not only going to art school, but also pursuing being a fashion designer. So anytime it was a gift time, I would get lots of art supplies. I got the fashion plates, which many people are probably aware of, as it's a toy that people are still producing now. And there was a doll that, I'm sorry, I've tried to find information online about it to find out what it was called. It would have been available in the late 70s, early 80s. It was not a Barbie, I remember that for sure, but it had slots down its arms, its legs, and its torso, and you would cut out scraps of fabric, and then you could tuck them into these slots and drape fabric and make outfits. So that was, of course, one of my favorite toys. I remember also one year my grandmother gave me a ream of paper and I produced costumes for my stuffed toys. I remember making my Gonzo from the Muppets. I made him into a bird with the paper. So it was something that was kind of evident, just I had a natural inclination to do things creative. It probably stemmed from my family because my parents had a small business, home business, where they produced plaster Paris items like knickknacks and wall hangings, and it was something that we just all did something. My older sister knitted, my younger sister cross-stitched, my parents did the plaster craft, my mother also crocheted, she did doilies and afghans. We were always doing something, and it was kind of one of those things where there wasn't a lot of people being idle. Now, I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, and one year when I was little, we went to the Three Rivers Arts Festival, which is a big festival all over the city of Pittsburgh. And I remember we came upon the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and my mother and I went in. And I don't remember how the conversation went because I was really little, but basically my mother was telling them about how I wanted to go there for school when I grew up. And there was a man, I don't know if he was an administrator, professor, or teacher, or if he was just a student that was kind of monitoring the lobby and things while the festival was going on, because a lot of people were coming and going. But I remember he took the 2 of us into an office. He opened up a booklet, like the pamphlet for the school. He pointed to the dollar amount that it cost to go to school, and he said, just to let you know, it is very expensive. From that moment on, I kind of never thought about going to art school again, which was really sad because it was kind of just removed from the possibilities. And of course, going to art school back then was a whole lot less expensive than it is now. And there were so many more options available to me than the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, obviously, which I don't even know what quality of education that would have been, because that was the last I ever looked into it. And I swear I was probably 10, maybe 9 at the time. And even though in high school I was in honors art throughout high school, and the last year I was there, the only way that I could have gotten into the senior year honors art was to take it with the freshmen, as you know, just a single person taking it then. So it was real fun because I got to see a lot of the freshmen doing art, and they got to see what somebody after like 4 years of being in that program could produce. And so that was a very interesting thing. Still at that point, even going to, the mandatory guidance counselor, art school was not something I ever even brought up. It wasn't anything that was offered up as a possibility. It was just something I just never thought could possibly happen. after high school, it wasn't for many, many, many years that I decided to start doing artwork again, and I eventually even moved into running an art supply store. While I was doing that, the hours were very limited from what I was used to having, the normal 6 days. The clopins, for anybody who works in retail knows what a clopin is. It's when you work from open to close. And, we had limited hours, so I had more free time. And so I started picking up doing artwork. I started doing urban sketching. I started entering shows. I even had some mild success with doing shows. And my biggest show, not a solo show, it was a women's show that the Butler Institute in Youngstown had set up, which was probably my most prestigious moment. I loved the fact that I was in that show with such wonderful people, and I just was having a good time doing art. And while I was running the art supply store, I was meeting a lot of students, I was meeting a lot of professors, and I decided that since I didn't work evenings, that I would try to take one course at one of the schools locally here every semester. Even though I wasn't degree seeking, wouldn't hurt if I was working my way towards one. So the school I decided to go to, I was living in Cleveland, which I still do now, was Cleveland State. And the reason I chose Cleveland State was the dean of their art program was a fine artist that worked traditionally and worked realistically, which is what I wanted to do at the time. I wanted to have that solid base. I wanted to have more knowledge of how to use materials than I currently had, and I wanted basically that foundation to build my artwork on. And so of course the first course you would take is 2D design, and I took it in the evenings. And I do feel bad for the professor still to this day. She's a wonderful lady, an incredible artist that actually has done installations. Like one of the things she did here was actually an entire RTA station, which was for our train, our if you want to call it a subway. It's not a subway because it doesn't run underground, but she designed and installed all this neon and lights and stuff in one of the RTA stations. So she's very creative and talented. But I did feel sorry for her because teaching a night class, you get mostly what I will call non-traditional students. So it was a lot of us that had been out in the world for a while and did not go straight from high school to college. We weren't 18, which is what you would run into when you're teaching that course during the day, during the week. You would run into mostly 18, 19-year-old students because it's what they take their first semester for the art program at Cleveland State. To give you an idea is we listened to a certain degree, and then that was as far as I think we were willing to listen. I remember she had us all bring in something to draw. Now, everybody could draw. Like, there was no doubt about that. Everybody could draw. She didn't have to teach a soul how to do that. And I remember I brought in this little knick-knack because it was fall, and it was a ceramic ghost that was just like shaped like a potato with a tiny dot of a head, but it was also a mummy, and it was like in terracotta, so it had some really great texture. And I was drawing that, and she came over to me and she said, "You need to do things that are deeper and darker. Like, why are you doing this like cutesy stuff?" And I just looked up at her and I said, people make a living at Hallmark and American Greetings. It could just be me one day." And she just walked away, and I don't think she was trying to be, she was definitely not being like discouraging. What she was trying to do, I think, was to get me out of my box. Now, the thing about my box is cutesy. You'll see that if you've followed me on social media for any amount of time. I do not do dark and serious. I do cutesy. That's what I do. That's what I like to do. I will tell you is there's a lot of really gritty areas of Cleveland, and when I draw them, they turn out cute. I have no control over it. It's how I see the world. And I think it's a magical way to see the world. Now, when I first started to take that 2D design class, the typical transition would be to drawing or painting. 101 in that program. While I was taking 2D design, they changed the progression of courses, which meant that I would have to take 3D design next. I would have no choice. If I wanted to get into painting or drawing, I had to take 3D design. I didn't really want to. I had no interest in it. The supplies were going to be much more expensive, whereas in 2D design, I own so much of the supplies already. I own nothing for 2D design, and I knew in passing the dean of the arts program, but I also knew his assistant very well because she came with her kids to the art supply store all the time. So one day I was dropping off the catalogs for the program, and she was in there, and so I was asking her, what do you think the chances of me getting a pass on that 3D design, since I'm not seeking a degree? If I plan to seek a degree, of course I would take the 3D courses. She said, well, I don't know, but then at that moment the dean was walking in, and so she started to ask him the question, saying, you know, she's not degree seeking. Could she get a pass into painting or drawing since she's not degree seeking? And he didn't even slow down. He just said flat out no. So at that point, I wasn't planning to go back to Cleveland State. I wasn't sour on the experience. I understand that there are rules in these programs for a reason, and that all the other students that would be going into painting 101 or drawing 101 would have had this 3D experience that I didn't have. And so I understood. At that point, I just decided I was going to learn as much as I possibly could on my own through watching videos, through reading books, through going to see artwork, to talking to people, to drawing with people. And I was just having a lot of fun doing all that. Now, there were other opportunities, obviously, around the city of where I could learn in a formal setting. Is the Cleveland Institute of Art wasn't an option at the time, just because of the sheer volume of time you have to dedicate to the education there, and that it's pretty impossible to go there as just one course at a time because the courses intermingle. There was our community college, which we call Tri-C, and the art programs there. I knew several of the teachers and they were wonderful. I just was a little turned off by it just because there were a lot of classes, several that were the ones I was interested in taking, where people just take it every semester repeatedly for basically the studio time. And I was more interested in actually a formal learning session than just, you know, basically open studio time. I wanted to really delve into the materials. I really wanted to learn how to use them. I wanted to learn about color and composition and everything that I hadn't had up till that point. That was kind of the mechanics as a main part of the education, and then the critique as the secondary, which I felt like most of those classes, the critique and the open studio time were the two main interests than most of the other students. So that wasn't an interest. The Cleveland Institute of Art does have non-credit classes that you can take during the evenings and on weekends. Often they're teaching certain crafts. I don't want to say crafts, like fine art crafts, like jewelry making and pottery and things like that. And I always felt that the courses they were offering never really gelled with what I wanted to learn. The Cleveland Museum of Art also had a nice program of education, and that just the timing never worked out because it was often, you know, during the weekend where other people have time, but I did not because I worked mostly Saturdays and almost all Saturdays and a lot of Sundays when class was in session, and I couldn't guarantee I could get there every time. Even when I was going to Cleveland State in the evening, it was very hard for me to get there to every class because of different things that were going on in the school. And I always viewed it as like, if I was going to arrive halfway through the class at that point, is it worth going? I mean, of course it is, but you're talking about, you got to drive there, you got to park, you got to haul all your stuff in, and at that point you have to wonder, is it worth it at that point? So there was opportunities around. One thing I started doing at the time was the pay-as-you-go life drawing course at Cleveland Institute of Art. It was like $15. You could go in, they would have a model and all the drawing courses and easels set up, so you could use all that, and you just had to bring your materials. And there was a professor on site, one that I actually knew because, of course, almost all the professors shopped at the art supply store. And he was really great because he usually just stood back and let people do what they wanted to do, because most were just paying the $15 just to get the live model. But once he knew that you wanted to learn something, he would definitely be there to help you. And I think it was a very low pressured teaching situation for a professor, because he's not trying to graduate someone, he's not trying to educate them to a point where other professors can continue to mold the student's education. It's just, how can this person get better? What are they not doing? How can they see better? Things like that. So it was very nice when I was able to go to that and I would often go with a friend, and we would have a good time drawing, and then we would chat with the professor afterwards and things. So it was really nice like that. And I did learn a lot about seeing. It was something I didn't really have a lot of interest in figure drawing up until that point. I was drawing mostly like animals and things like that. But of course, like, those kind of skills carry over into any kind of anatomy, is learning to see the proportions and the structure of the figure. And so that was a nice opportunity there for me. So aside from actually not having learned the foundation of art and the usage of supplies and the mechanics of drawing and painting and the critiques that you would get from not only your professors but your fellow students, I do feel there was one key thing that I did miss out on for having not gone to art school, and that is networking. Something can definitely be said for having a network of people to support you professionally and creatively, of either people that you've gone to school with, people that you've worked professionally with, or people that you've studied under. Not only just to advance yourself throughout your career as an artist in what you actually create, but also to support you in finding work and finding shows and getting into shows. I think that's similar with most creative industries, in that it's not only what you produce, but also who you know. And that is definitely something I feel just developing my skills, my creativity, my artistic vision on my own has hindered me, in that I'm just alone working in a room, and even though I may have people that see my work on social media and I may show to a lot of friends and acquaintances, it doesn't progress much further than that without kind of having that connection. I guess the last thing I can say, and this ties into it, is that I missed out on having not gone to art school, is learning how to speak about my art, how to write about my art, how to make an artistic vision statement. Those are things that I never had to do, I never learned how to do. I don't have a lot of interest in doing it, so unless a formal educational setting forced me into doing it, I don't think it's something that I foresee myself ever doing. Basically, my artistic vision is, hey, that seems like that's a cool idea. Why don't I try it? And when you're doing artwork mostly for yourself, that's definitely a fine artistic statement if I've ever heard one. But if you're looking to get into it as a career, as an illustrator, as a fine artist, as somebody who's going to be in a museum, somebody who's going to have a book published, somebody who's going to have their shows travel to different galleries and museums, I mean, that's not going to float, and if I owned a gallery, I wouldn't invest my space and time into somebody who's like, oh, they just thought that was a cool idea and there's nothing else in that for us. there's nothing in for our patrons to look at. I can totally understand that. So I think that, you know, that was one other thing that I did miss out on. I wanted to thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe to my channel as more videos are coming. You can also follow me on Instagram, also at maureen.celeste. And my message to you is to practice. Michael Jordan didn't become Michael Jordan by not practicing. So practice, practice, practice. It's okay if you churn out junk. Practice.